Imagine standing in front of a priceless ancient statue. Scientists spend months testing it. Lawyers verify documents. Experts analyze marble samples. Everything says it's authentic. And yet, within 2 seconds of seeing it, a few art historians feel something deeply wrong. No evidence. No analysis. Just a powerful instinct whispering this is fake. Who do you trust? The months of careful reasoning or the instant gut reaction? That question sits at the heart of Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. This book explores the mysterious moments when we think without thinking, when our minds make rapid judgments that can be astonishingly accurate and sometimes dangerously wrong. Today, we'll break down how those snap decisions work, why they matter, and how learning to understand them can change the way we see people, choices, and the world around us. The statue that didn't look right. Gladwell opens with a remarkable story of a marble statue known as a kouros, supposedly dating back to ancient Greece. When the Getty Museum was offered this statue, it seemed like a dream acquisition. It was almost perfectly preserved, rare and stunning. Scientists subjected it to exhaustive testing. Geological analysis showed the marble was ancient. Microscopic examinations suggested centuries of aging. Legal documents traced its ownership back decades. After 14 months of investigation, the Getty paid nearly $10 million for it. But something strange happened. When some of the world's leading art historians saw the statue for the first time, they immediately felt uneasy. One thought the fingernails looked wrong. Another felt an unexplained sense of discomfort. A former museum director's first thought was a single word: fresh. None of them could explain why. They just knew something was off. Over time, the experts' instincts proved correct. Documents turned out to be forged. Stylistic details didn't align with any one historical period. Eventually, the Getty labeled the statue as possibly a modern forgery. The shocking truth was that these experts understood the statue more accurately in 2 seconds than the museum did in 14 months. This story introduces the central idea of blink. Our minds have a powerful ability to make rapid judgments using very little information. These judgments happen in what Gladwell calls the first 2 seconds. The book is about understanding when those instincts are trustworthy, when they fail us, and how we can train ourselves to use them better. Chapter 1. The Theory of Thin Slices. How a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. At the core of Blink lies a simple but unsettling idea. Sometimes we know far more than we think we do, far earlier than we realize. Malcolm Gladwell calls this ability thin slicing, the unconscious skill of extracting meaning from very small amounts of information. Most of us believe that good decisions require careful thought, detailed analysis, and as much information as possible. We assume that the longer we think, the smarter our conclusions become. But thin slicing challenges that assumption. It suggests that the human mind is capable of making surprisingly accurate judgments almost instantly by focusing only on what truly matters and filtering out everything else. Gladwell introduces a famous experiment conducted at the University of Iowa to illustrate this idea. Participants were asked to play a gambling game involving 4 decks of cards. 2 decks were dangerous, offering high rewards but even higher losses. The other 2 decks were safe, delivering modest but consistent gains. The participants were free to draw cards from any deck. What made this experiment fascinating was not just how people learned the rules of the game, but how they learned them. Consciously, most players needed to draw around 80 cards before they could clearly explain which decks were risky and why. But their bodies reacted much sooner. After just 10 cards, sensors attached to their hands detected increased sweating whenever players reached for the dangerous decks. Their behavior changed before their reasoning did. Long before they could articulate a strategy, they had already begun avoiding the bad decks. The unconscious mind had recognized the pattern and taken action, even while the conscious mind was still in the dark. This experiment reveals a critical truth. The unconscious often understands situations faster than conscious thought. It processes information quietly, automatically, and efficiently. Thin slicing is not guessing. It is rapid pattern recognition built from experience. Gladwell deepens this idea through the work of psychologist John Gottman, who studies marital relationships. Gottman can predict with remarkable accuracy whether a couple will divorce, simply by observing them for a few minutes. He listens to tone of voice, watches facial expressions, and tracks subtle emotional cues. From these thin slices of interaction, he identifies stable patterns that define the relationship. The key insight of this chapter is that complexity does not always require long analysis. Sometimes the truth of a situation is embedded in its smallest details. When thin slicing works well, it allows us to see clearly without being overwhelmed. Chapter 2, The Locked Door, The Secret Life of Snap Decisions. If thin slicing explains what happens in rapid decision-making, the adaptive unconscious explains how it happens. In this chapter, Gladwell explores the mental system responsible for snap judgments. The adaptive unconscious is a part of the brain that operates continuously, without our awareness. It handles enormous amounts of information, allowing us to function efficiently in a complex world. It helps us recognize faces, interpret emotions, assess danger, and navigate social situations, all in fractions of a second. Unlike conscious thought, the adaptive unconscious does not speak in clear sentences or logical arguments. It communicates through feelings, impressions, and instincts. This is why we often say things like, "I don't know why, but something felt off." The feeling arrives before the explanation. Gladwell explains that human thinking operates using two systems. One is slow, deliberate, and analytical. The other is fast, intuitive, and automatic. Modern society strongly favors the slow system. We are taught to think things through, gather more information, and avoid snap judgments. But real life often doesn't give us that luxury. In emergencies, social encounters, and high-pressure environments, slow thinking is simply too slow. The adaptive unconscious steps in because it has to. The problem arises when we overload this system. When we flood ourselves with too much information, we sometimes paralyze the unconscious instead of helping it. Gladwell describes situations where people make worse decisions after being given more data, not less. The locked door in the chapter's title represents moments when conscious analysis blocks intuitive insight. By forcing ourselves to explain and justify decisions prematurely, we sometimes shut out the very process that could guide us correctly. This chapter reminds us that intuition is not the enemy of reason. It is a different form of intelligence, one that must be respected but also understood. Chapter 3, The Warren Harding Error, Why We Fall for Tall, Dark, and Handsome Men. After showing how powerful snap judgments can be, Gladwell turns to their most dangerous flaw, bias. The Warren Harding error demonstrates how easily the unconscious can be misled. Warren Harding became president of the United States largely because he looked like one. He was tall, handsome, confident, and spoke with authority. Voters and political leaders equated these traits with competence and leadership. In reality, Harding was deeply unqualified, and his presidency became one of the most disastrous in American history. This error occurs because the unconscious mind relies on associations. Over time, we absorb cultural messages linking appearance with ability. Height becomes associated with authority, attractiveness with intelligence, confidence with competence. These associations operate automatically, even when we consciously reject stereotypes. Studies show that taller people are more likely to be hired, promoted, and elected. Attractive defendants receive lighter sentences, while spoken candidates are assumed to be more capable. The danger lies in the fact that the unconscious does exactly what it is designed to do. It draws conclusions quickly from limited information. The problem is not speed, but relevance. When irrelevant traits dominate our judgment, snap decisions become deeply flawed. This chapter makes it clear that intuition is not neutral. It reflects the environment and culture that shape it. If those influences are biased, our instincts will be biased too. Chapter 4, Paul Van Riper's Big Victory, Creating Structure for Spontaneity. In this chapter, Gladwell explores when intuition works at its absolute best. The answer lies in experience and preparation. He tells the story of a U.S. military war game designed to test modern, technology-driven combat strategies. Retired General Paul Van Riper led the opposing force. Instead of relying on complex simulations and digital communication systems, Van Riper used simple, unconventional methods. He trusted his instincts forged by decades of battlefield experience. While the technologically superior force relied on rigid procedures, Van Riper adapted rapidly, exploited weaknesses, and achieved a decisive victory. Gladwell's point is not that intuition is magical. Van Riper's snap decisions were effective because they were grounded in deep expertise. His unconscious had been trained over years of real-world experience. This chapter emphasizes the importance of structure. Training, discipline, and preparation create the foundation that allows intuition to function reliably. Without structure, spontaneity becomes recklessness. Without spontaneity, structure becomes rigidity. The best decisions occur when experienced intuition operates within well-designed systems. Chapter 5, Kenna's Dilemma, the right and wrong way to ask people what they want. In this chapter, Gladwell examines a surprising limitation of conscious thought. People are often poor judges of their own preferences. He tells the story of Kenna, a musician admired by critics but ignored by mainstream audiences. Focus groups and surveys failed to explain the disconnect. When asked directly, people offered thoughtful-sounding reasons for why they did or didn't like his music, but those explanations didn't predict their actual behavior. The problem is that the conscious mind is skilled at rationalization, not introspection. When people are asked why they like something, they often invent reasons that sound logical rather than revealing the true cause. Gladwell argues that behavior is a more reliable guide than explanation. What people do reveals far more than what they say. This insight has powerful implications for marketing, design, and decision-making. Instead of asking people to explain their feelings, observing real choices allows us to thin-slice genuine preferences. Chapter 6, 7 Seconds in the Bronx, the delicate art of mind reading. The final chapter confronts the most serious consequences of snap judgments. Gladwell examines the tragic shooting of Amadou Diallo, an unarmed man killed by police officers who misinterpreted his movements in a matter of seconds. Under extreme stress, the mind narrows its focus. This phenomenon, known as mind blindness, reduces our ability to interpret context, intentions, and alternatives. In such moments, even well-trained individuals can make fatal errors. Gladwell explains that snap judgments are especially vulnerable to failure under conditions of fear, time pressure, and emotional overload. Training alone cannot eliminate these risks. The solution lies in redesigning environments, reducing unnecessary stress, simplifying decision-making contexts, and acknowledging human cognitive limits. This chapter makes one thing clear. Understanding rapid cognition is not just about performance or success. It is about responsibility, ethics, and human life. Listening with your eyes, the lessons of Blink. In the end, Blink is not about celebrating instinct or rejecting logic. It's about balance. Gladwell shows us that our snap judgments can be astonishingly insightful, but only when we understand their limits. We must learn when to trust our instincts and when to question them. We must recognize how bias, emotion, and context shape our first impressions. And most importantly, we must realize that intuition can be trained. The power of thinking without thinking is not a mysterious gift reserved for a few. It is a skill, one that grows with experience, awareness, and humility. When we learn to listen carefully to those first 2 seconds, without surrendering to them blindly, we begin to see the world more clearly. That is the true lesson of Blink.